Your intranet wasn't designed for how people work today. It was designed for structure, pages, navigation, hierarchies. And the assumption that people know what they're looking for, that assumption is broken. Because today, work doesn't start with navigation, it starts with context. Most SharePoint sites are built on a single flawed idea, the idea that people will browse, that they'll click through menus, that they'll follow the path you designed for them. This was defensible in 2010. Organizations were smaller, information was simpler, people sat in the same building and learned the intranet by walking past it. But that world is gone. Now your users are remote. They're in Teams, they're on mobile, they're switching between 5 applications before breakfast. They don't start their day by opening the intranet homepage and exploring. They start with a problem, a question, a deadline. They need an answer in the next 90 seconds, and they have no patience for your carefully designed hierarchy. This is the structural flaw behind most failed intranet projects. Not bad design, not poor governance, not a lack of training. The flaw is the model itself. You built a library when people needed a GPS. You organize content for people who have time to look in a world where nobody has time to look. And until you see this assumption for what it is, every SharePoint project you launch will carry it inside like a virus. The navigation assumption is buried so deep that most organizations don't even know they hold it. They hire consultants to redesign the navigation. They run workshops on information architecture. They debate whether the HR page should live under people or under services. And all of it assumes that if the structure is right, people will find what they need. But the structure was never the problem. The problem is that work no longer moves through structures. It moves through context, a meeting mention, a Teams chat, a search query, a Copilot prompt. Your intranet is still designed for the old path while your users have already left it behind. Think about how you actually find information when you're under pressure. You don't open a portal, you search, you ask a colleague, you check your chat history. If you're lucky, you ask Copilot. The idea that someone will calmly browse through 5 levels of navigation to find a policy document is a fantasy that only survives in conference rooms, not in real work. Yet most SharePoint environments are still built like digital filing cabinets. Every site collection is a drawer, every subsite is a folder, every page is a label, and the whole thing depends on users knowing which drawer to open before they start. This navigation-first design also creates a training burden that most enterprises underestimate. Every new employee needs to learn the intranet structure. Every reorganization breaks the structure they've learned. Every new site collection adds another drawer to remember. After a few years, the mental map required to navigate the environment becomes so complex that only long-tenured employees can use it effectively. New hires are lost, contractors are lost, employees who transferred from another division are lost. The intranet becomes a tool for insiders instead of a resource for everyone. And the organization mistakes insider knowledge for good design. Context is the starting point of modern work. It means the user doesn't need to know where something lives. They need to know what they're trying to do, and the system should meet them there. But SharePoint was never built for context. It was built for location. And that difference explains why so many intranet projects look successful on paper while failing in practice. The shift from location to context is not a feature request. It's a fundamental rethinking of what an intranet is. A location-based system asks the user to understand the organization's structure. A context-based system asks the organization to understand the user's situation. One puts burden on the employee, the other puts intelligence in the platform. And until SharePoint environments are designed around context instead of location, every new site collection, every new subsite, and every new navigation menu will make the problem worse instead of better. Location-based design made sense when documents had one home. When the org chart determined the site structure. When the person who needed the travel policy worked in the same department that wrote it. But modern work cuts across departments, time zones, and applications. A sales rep in Berlin needs the same onboarding information as a support engineer in Sydney. They don't care which department owns the page. They care whether the page answers their question. And right now, most SharePoint environments force them to care about the department first and the answer second. That's backwards, and it's why so many pages sit in beautiful site collections that nobody ever visits. The navigation assumption also creates a hidden cost that doesn't show up in project budgets. Every time a user can't find something, they don't report it. They give up, they ask a colleague, they create a duplicate, they store the document in their own OneDrive because they can't remember which team site holds the official version. These workarounds multiply across thousands of employees until your SharePoint environment becomes a digital junkyard. Clean structures on the surface, chaos underneath, and nobody can see it because the metrics you're tracking don't measure frustration. This duplication also creates compliance and legal risks. When an employee saves a policy document to their personal OneDrive, that copy is no longer governed by the retention policies applied to the original. When they share it with a colleague via email attachment, the organization loses visibility into who has access to what. When multiple departments each maintain their own version of the same procedure, there is no single source of truth. Auditors ask for the official policy and receive 3 different versions. Legal asks for the current procedure and finds 5 conflicting copies. The navigation assumption doesn't just make users inefficient. It actively undermines governance in ways that most enterprises never trace back to the root cause. publish and forget architecture. But the real problem isn't the design. It's what happens after you hit publish. Most SharePoint projects follow the same life cycle. Months of planning, workshops on governance, discussions about templates, content reviews, training sessions for site owners. Then the page goes live, the project is declared a success, and nothing happens. The page remains unchanged for 6 months. Then a year, then 2 years. Meanwhile, the policy it references has been updated. The team it describes has been restructured. The contact person has left the company. But the page still sits there, collecting views, misleading users, and slowly eroding trust. This is the publish and forget architecture, and it's the default operating model for most enterprises. SharePoint is treated like a construction project, not like a product. You build it, you launch it, and you move on to the next project. There is no feedback loop, there is no telemetry, there is no iteration. The team that built the site has disbanded. The site owner has a new job, the content author hasn't logged in since the training session. And the page drifts further from reality with every passing week. The problem isn't that people are lazy, the problem is the model. When you treat an intranet like a building, you assume it stays useful once it's built. But an intranet is not a building, it's a garden. It needs constant attention, or it becomes overgrown with outdated content, broken links, and confusing navigation. And yet most enterprises invest 10 times more effort in building new sites than in maintaining existing ones. They measure success by launch date, not by whether anyone actually uses what was launched. This imbalance shows up in budgets too. A typical SharePoint redesign project might cost $200,000 in consulting, design, and development. The annual maintenance budget for the resulting environment is often $10,000, if it exists at all. That is a 20-to-1 ratio of build to maintain. No product team in any successful technology company operates with those proportions. They invest continuously, they measure continuously, they improve continuously, because they understand that software is not a deliverable. It's an ongoing relationship with the user. Your intranet deserves the same relationship. The maintenance gap also shows up in staffing models. Many organizations appoint site owners as volunteers. They are business users with full-time jobs who happen to own a SharePoint site because they were in the meeting when it was created. They receive no training refreshers, they have no time allocated for content reviews, and they often don't even know they still own the site until someone complains. This volunteer model is not governance, it's neglect with a name tag. A product requires dedicated ownership, someone whose job includes keeping the product healthy, not as an afterthought, as a primary responsibility. Consider what this means at scale. A typical organization has thousands of SharePoint pages. Some have tens of thousands. If each page is only reviewed once per year, you need a full-time army of content owners just to keep things current. And since most site owners are volunteers with day jobs, the review never happens. Content becomes outdated, pages become cluttered, navigation becomes confusing, employees can't find information. And the organization has no visibility into any of it. The publish and forget model also creates a dangerous illusion. When leadership asks about intranet success, the team shows page views. Look, 15,000 people visited the HR portal last month. But page views don't mean the content was useful. They don't mean users found what they needed. They only mean that somebody opened the page, probably because they had no other choice. The project looks successful on the metrics while quietly failing the users. And because nobody measures the failure, it continues indefinitely. What makes this particularly damaging is that the next project starts from the same broken assumption. The team sees the old site is struggling, so they build a new one with better templates, with updated branding, with a redesigned navigation. And they launch it with the same ceremony, the same training, and the same absence of any plan for ongoing measurement. The cycle repeats. Every few years, a new intranet is born, celebrated, and abandoned. And the employees learn to ignore it because they know it won't be maintained. This isn't a technology problem. SharePoint has the tools. The problem is the mental model. Organizations think in projects, not in products. They fund launches, not operations. They celebrate go-live dates, not ongoing outcomes. And until that model changes, no amount of AI or new features will fix what's really broken. The shift from project thinking to product thinking is the hardest organizational change in this entire conversation. It means your intranet team doesn't disband after launch. It means you have a budget for continuous improvement, not just initial build. It means success is measured by whether users accomplish their goals, not by whether a page went live on schedule. And it means you need telemetry, real telemetry, not page views, not vanity metrics, behavioral signals that tell you whether the page is working or whether it's just sitting there, accumulating digital dust. What the metrics actually hide. And the worst part? You probably think you know how your pages are performing. You don't. Most organizations track the wrong things. They measure activity instead of outcomes. Page views tell you that somebody opened a page. They do not tell you whether the content was useful. They do not tell you whether users found what they needed. They do not tell you whether users scrolled, clicked, or became frustrated. The gap between visited and satisfied is where intranets die. And it's a gap that traditional SharePoint analytics never show you. Let's be specific. A page receives 20,000 views in a month. By old standards, that's a success. The team reports it to leadership. The site owner gets praised. But what if the average scroll depth is 18%? What if users leave after 10 seconds? What if rage clicks cluster around a table that looks interactive but isn't? Suddenly the page looks very different. 20,000 people arrived, looked around, realized the page wasn't helping them, and left. That's not success. That's a billboard on a highway that everyone drives past without reading. Traditional metrics also hide search failures. SharePoint analytics will show you which pages are popular. It won't show you which searches failed. It won't show you that 300 employees searched for vacation request last month and never found the right page. Those 300 people didn't show up in your page view report because they never reached the destination. They tried, failed, and gave up. To your analytics, they don't exist. But to your business, they're 300 frustrated employees who learned that the intranet doesn't work. This is why vanity metrics are dangerous. They don't just fail to measure quality, they actively obscure failure. A page with high traffic and low satisfaction looks like a star performer. A page with low traffic but high task completion looks like a failure. If you optimize for the wrong signal, you optimize toward more frustration. You feature the popular page, you clone its layout, you recommend it as a template. And all the while, the page that actually helps users sits unnoticed because it doesn't generate enough traffic to register on your dashboard. The real signal you need is behavioral. Not whether someone visited, but what they did. Did they scroll? Did they click the right elements? Did they find the answer and leave satisfied? Or did they bounce in confusion? These questions require a different kind of analytics, not the kind that comes built into SharePoint, the kind that watches how users actually interact with the page. Scroll depth, click maps, session recordings, rage clicks, these are the metrics that expose the truth. And until you have them, you're managing your intranet with the lights off. There's another layer to this problem. Even when organizations do track some behavior, they track it at the wrong level. They look at site-level trends instead of page-level friction. They report monthly averages instead of specific pain points. They see that overall intranet traffic is up and conclude that things are improving. But traffic can go up for all the wrong reasons. More users searching because they can't find things. More repeat visits because the first visit didn't solve the problem. More page loads because a broken link sends people in circles. Aggregate metrics smooth over these individual failures until they become invisible. And invisible problems don't get fixed. The reporting cadence is also part of the problem. Monthly or quarterly analytics reviews are too slow for digital experiences that change daily. A page breaks on Monday. Users struggle all week. The monthly report captures the aggregated data and shows slightly elevated traffic. Nobody notices the problem until the next quarterly review, by which time thousands of users have been affected. In a product-driven environment, you would see the issue within hours and fix it within days. In a project-driven environment, you might not see it for months. The reporting rhythm is matched to project milestones, not user needs. And that mismatch alone explains why so many intranets feel abandoned even when they're technically active. This is where the next generation of analytics becomes important. Not bigger dashboards, not prettier reports. Signals that connect specific user struggles to specific page elements. A search query that returns no results. A click on what looks like a button but isn't. A scroll that stops at the same point on every session recording. These are the diagnostic signals that tell you exactly where the page is broken, and they are completely absent from the metrics most teams currently trust. The cost of missing these signals is hard to quantify, but easy to illustrate. If a high-traffic page fails 500 users per week, and each failure costs 10 minutes of wasted time, that's 5,000 minutes per week. Over a year, that's 4,000 hours. At a loaded cost of $50 per hour, that's $200,000 in lost productivity from a single broken page. And most companies have dozens of pages with similar failure rates. The total cost of poor intranet usability often exceeds the entire annual budget for the intranet team. But because the cost is distributed across thousands of employees and never appears on a single line item, it remains invisible to leadership. Until you have behavioral analytics, you're managing by hope instead of evidence. The department site syndrome. This isn't a theoretical problem. Walk into any department site and you'll see the symptoms. Take a typical HR portal. The benefits page was created 18 months ago. The content was reviewed once at launch. It receives 15,000 views per month. By every traditional metric, it's one of the most successful pages in the tenant. But look closer. Clarity shows that the average scroll depth is 18%. Users spend an average of 10 seconds on the page. Rage clicks cluster around the benefits comparison table because it looks like it should be interactive, but it's just a static image. 340 employees search for vacation request every month, and the search results send them to IT, not HR. The page is a traffic success and a mission failure. This is the department site syndrome. Each department builds its own site, designs its own navigation, and publishes its own content. From the department's perspective, everything looks fine. The page went live. The content is accurate, or at least it was when it was published. The site owner checks the view count and feels good. But from the user's perspective, the experience is broken. They don't care about the department boundary. They don't know that the PTO policy lives in HR while the laptop request lives in IT. They just need an answer. And your navigation structure forces them to understand your org chart before they can solve their problem. The department site syndrome gets worse over time. As departments add more pages, the navigation grows. Subsites multiply, link rot accumulates, content owners change roles and stop updating their pages. New employees inherit sites they didn't build and don't understand. And because there's no centralized measurement of user experience, each department operates in isolation, unaware that their users are bouncing between 3 different sites trying to complete a single task. The intranet becomes a collection of disconnected islands, each with its own structure, its own terminology, and its own abandoned corners. What's particularly insidious is that this syndrome hides inside success metrics. Every department can point to their view counts. Every site owner can show that their pages are visited. But none of them can show that users actually accomplished what they came to do. The intranet looks healthy from above while quietly failing at the level where real work happens. And because the failure is distributed across thousands of pages, nobody sees the pattern. Each broken page is an isolated incident. But together they form a systemic collapse of findability, usability, and trust. I wonder what clarity would show on your homepage. Consider what this means for a new employee. On their first day, they need to set up their laptop, find the benefits enrollment form, and locate the expense policy. In a healthy system, they'd search for each topic and land on the right page immediately. In most SharePoint environments, they search, find 3 competing versions of the same document, click the wrong one, realize it's outdated, backtrack, try another link, and eventually ask a colleague instead. The colleague sends them a OneDrive link to the actual current version. The new employee bookmarks it. 6 months later, that link is also outdated. But they'll keep using it because the official intranet already failed them once. This is how shadow libraries form. Not because users are careless, because the official system didn't work. The department site syndrome isn't caused by bad intentions. It's caused by a structural model that assumes departments own information and users will browse by department. That model made sense in the era of physical filing cabinets. It makes no sense in an era of search, chat, and AI-assisted discovery. Yet it's still the default architecture for most SharePoint environments, and it will stay that way until someone measures the user experience across departmental boundaries and proves that the model is failing. What makes this syndrome so persistent is that it aligns with organizational power structures. Departments own budgets, departments own headcount, departments own priorities. So when a new site is needed, the department builds it, maintains it, and measures it. There is no central owner for the user journey that crosses departments. Nobody is measured on whether a new employee can smoothly navigate from HR to IT to finance in their first week. Each department optimizes for its own metrics, and the cross-departmental experience falls through the cracks. This is not a SharePoint problem, it's an organizational design problem, and SharePoint merely reflects it. Microsoft Graph, the structural blueprint. To fix this, you need a new kind of visibility, not just what people visited, what they did. But before you can understand behavior, you need to understand structure, because AI can't optimize what it can't read. And most AI systems looking at your SharePoint environment today would see a mess. Not because the content is bad, because the structure isn't machine readable, pages without clear headings, navigation that changes from site to site, metadata that's inconsistent or missing entirely, web parts that look similar but contain completely different types of information. To an AI, this is like trying to read a library where every book has a different color cover, no spine labels, and the shelves were arranged by mood instead of topic. This is where Microsoft Graph becomes essential, not as a nice-to-have integration, as the foundation. Graph is the structural blueprint of your digital workplace. It knows what pages exist, it knows which web parts are on those pages, it knows how sites connect, what metadata is attached, and which permissions govern who can see what. It maps the relationships between users, groups, files, meetings, and content. Without this blueprint, AI is blind. It can read text, but it can't understand architecture. It can answer questions, but it can't diagnose structural problems. It can generate content, but it can't generate the right structure for that content to live in. Graph plays 3 critical roles in an AI-driven intranet. First, it provides permission-aware retrieval. This matters more than most people realize. An AI that suggests content without respecting access controls isn't helpful. It's a liability. Graph ensures that any recommendation, any summary, any generated page only uses content the user is allowed to see. This isn't a feature, it's a prerequisite for enterprise adoption. You can't deploy AI at scale in an organization with confidential data unless the AI understands boundaries. Graph provides those boundaries automatically because it inherits the same permissions that govern human access. Second, Graph provides behavioral signals, not just who accessed what, but how work actually flows. Which documents are frequently accessed together? Which teams collaborate across which sites? Which topics co-occur in user interactions? These patterns reveal how information is actually used, not how it was designed to be used. The org chart says the finance team and the sales team are separate. Graph might show that they access the same pricing documents every week. That signal tells you something your navigation structure doesn't. It tells you where the real connections are. And an AI that can see those connections can design experiences that match actual work patterns instead of theoretical org structures. Third, Graph Data Connect allows organizations to export this structural and behavioral data at scale into Azure. This is where advanced analytics and custom AI applications come in. You can build knowledge-based construction tools, expert finding systems, content recommendation engines that go far beyond what's built into SharePoint. For architects, this is the extensibility layer. It means you're not limited to Microsoft's AI features. You can build your own models that understand your specific environment, your specific terminology, and your specific work patterns. But all of them depend on Graph as the source of truth. The practical implication is clear. If your SharePoint environment has poor information architecture, Graph will expose it, not as a human-readable report that sits in an inbox. As a machine-readable reality that shapes every AI interaction. If your metadata is inconsistent, AI can't filter effectively. If your navigation is fragmented, AI can't suggest related content. If your permissions are messy, AI can't safely retrieve information. Graph doesn't fix these problems. It makes them visible to systems that can. And that visibility is the first step toward automated optimization. For the technically minded, Graph exposes this structural data through specific endpoints that matter for AI integration. The site's endpoint reveals site collections, hubs, and their relationships. The page's endpoint exposes modern page content, including web part types and their configurations. The lists and list item endpoints provide access to metadata, content types, and custom fields. The drive and drive item endpoints handle document libraries and files. The search endpoint queries across all these surfaces simultaneously. And perhaps most critically for AI, the beta endpoints for page diagnostics and web part usage are beginning to expose performance and engagement data at the component level. This means an AI system can not only read what a page contains, but understand how each element on that page performs relative to others. Graph Data Connect pushes this even further by allowing bulk export of interaction data into Azure Data Lake. Organizations can then run custom machine learning models over their entire SharePoint corpus. They can identify which page layouts predict higher engagement. They can cluster documents by semantic similarity rather than folder location. They can build recommendation engines that suggest related content based on actual co-access patterns, not manual tagging. This is the difference between a search engine that matches keywords and an AI that understands relationships. And those relationships live in Graph. Building an AI-native intranet increasingly means designing not just sites and pages, but the Graph surfaces underneath them. The content, the metadata, the permissions, the connections. These are the inputs that determine whether your AI experiences are accurate, relevant, and secure. A beautiful page with bad graph data is like a car with no engine. It looks fine. It doesn't go anywhere useful. Many organizations spend months on visual design while ignoring graph readiness. They debate color schemes and branding, while their metadata is a free text field that contains 14 different spellings of the same department. They redesign the homepage while permissions are inherited through chains that nobody can trace. This is backwards. In an AI-driven environment, the invisible structure matters more than the visible design, because the AI sees the structure, the user sees the design, and if the structure is broken, the design is just a pretty wrapper around a flawed system. The organizations that get ahead will be the ones that treat Graph as a first-class design surface. They'll standardize metadata schemas before they launch new sites. They'll clean up permissions before they deploy Copilot. They'll connect related sites through hub relationships so Graph can see the patterns. This is unglamorous work and it doesn't show up in demos. But it's the work that makes every AI feature you deploy actually function. Without it, you're building on sand. There's a practical checklist that Graph-ready organizations follow. Every key document uses a defined content type, not the generic document type. Every site belongs to a hub with a clear relationship to other hubs. Every page has a descriptive title and a meaningful description field. Every list has indexed columns for the fields most commonly filtered or searched. Permissions are managed through groups, not through individual user assignments at the item level. These are not advanced practices, they're basic hygiene, but most environments lack them. And the absence of this hygiene is what makes AI integration so frustrating. The AI tries to read the structure, finds inconsistency, and either fails silently or produces recommendations that don't match reality. SharePoint analytics. Popularity is not quality. But structure alone doesn't tell you if the page works. For that, you need usage signals. And this is where most companies discover a problem they didn't know they had. SharePoint analytics provides the first layer of these signals. Page views, unique visitors, returning visitors, usage trends. These numbers tell you what's popular. They don't tell you what's effective. And confusing those two things is one of the most expensive mistakes an intranet team can make. A page with 500 views and 80% task completion is more valuable than a page with 50,000 views and 5% completion. But your analytics dashboard won't tell you that. It will sort by views. It will highlight the popular page. It will recommend you feature it, clone it, and make it a template. And all the while, the page that actually helps users is invisible because it never generated enough traffic to register as important. This is how you optimize toward frustration, by following the signal that says loud instead of the signal that says useful. The danger of popularity metrics is that they reward the wrong behavior. A confusing page generates more views because users have to visit it multiple times to find what they need. A broken search experience drives more page views because users click through every result hoping one will help. A poorly organized site gets more traffic because users open 10 pages looking for the right one. In each case, high traffic is a symptom of failure, not success. But the dashboard shows green. The report looks good. The meeting ends with everyone feeling confident about a site that's quietly wasting thousands of hours of employee time. SharePoint Analytics does provide useful signals when you know how to read them. Returning visitors can indicate content that people actually rely on, especially if the return rate is high and the time on page is reasonable. Usage trends can show you which content is growing in importance and which is fading. Popularity spikes can alert you to new needs or urgent topics. The data isn't useless, it's just incomplete. It's one color in a palette that requires several others to paint an accurate picture. What you need is a way to combine popularity with purpose. Not just how many people visited, but whether they found what they came for. Not just which pages are trending, but which pages are solving problems. This requires connecting SharePoint Analytics with other signal sources. Search data to see what people were looking for before they arrived. Clarity data to see what they did after they got there. Graph data to understand the structure they navigated through. Only when you combine these sources can you distinguish a popular failure from an effective page that serves a smaller audience. The other blind spot in traditional analytics is that they aggregate away the individual experience. A page with 20,000 monthly views and an average time of 30 seconds looks healthy. But that average hides the fact that half the visitors left in 5 seconds, while the other half spent 2 minutes reading carefully. It hides the fact that mobile users have a completely different experience than desktop users. It hides the fact that the page performs well for senior staff who know exactly where to look, but fails completely for new employees who have no context. Averages are comfortable, they make reports look clean, but they make problems invisible by smoothing them into curves that nobody questions. There's also a question of what SharePoint Analytics specifically can and cannot tell you. It tracks page views, unique visitors, and time spent. It can show you trends over time and compare periods. But it does not track scroll depth. It does not track click coordinates. It does not distinguish between a user who read the entire page and a user who opened it, got confused, and left immediately. Both show up as a page view with a short duration. The analytics surface is useful for macro trends. It's useless for micro-diagnosis. And intranet quality lives at the micro level. A single broken link in a critical path can frustrate thousands of users. But the macro report will show green because the overall site traffic is unchanged. If you're using SharePoint Analytics as your primary measurement tool, you're flying with one instrument in a cockpit that needs 5. You can see altitude, but you can't see fuel. You can see speed, but you can't see weather. You can land the plane, but you have no idea whether you're landing at the right airport. The metrics aren't wrong. They're just insufficient for the complexity of what you're trying to measure. And the sooner you admit that, the sooner you can start building the telemetry system that actually tells you what's happening. The practical implication is that you need to stop reporting analytics in isolation. The next time someone presents page view numbers in a meeting, ask the questions that actually matter. What percentage of those visitors completed their task? How many returned to search within the same session? Which devices did they use? How did mobile performance compare to desktop? What was the scroll depth on the most important section? If the presenter can't answer these questions, the numbers are noise. And decisions based on noise are worse than decisions based on no data at all, because noise creates false confidence. Microsoft Search. Intent is the signal. If analytics tell you what happened, search data tells you what people actually wanted. Search is the most underutilized source of insight in most SharePoint environments. And that's strange because it's also the most honest. When a user types a query into the search box, they're not browsing. They're stating intent. They're telling you exactly what they need in their own words without any filtering or corporate vocabulary. Vacation request, laptop setup, expense policy, new hire checklist. These are not navigation paths. They're problems. And every one of them is a signal about where your intranet is failing. Failed searches are the most valuable data you have. When 300 employees search for vacation request and none of them reach the right page, that's not a search problem. It's a findability problem. It's a terminology problem. It's a structural problem. Maybe the page exists but uses the phrase time off instead of vacation. Maybe the page lives in HR, but the search ranking pushes the IT equipment request page higher because it happens to contain the word request more often. Maybe the page was published 18 months ago and the search index hasn't been tuned to prioritize current policy documents. Whatever the cause, The search log captures a user need that your current structure isn't meeting, and it does so in a way that page views never could. Search data also reveals content gaps. When you see the same query appearing week after week and no existing page addresses it, you have clear evidence of demand without supply. This is more actionable than any user survey. Surveys ask people to remember what they couldn't find. Search logs show you in real time. If 50 people per week are searching for remote work reimbursement policy and finding nothing, you don't need a committee to decide whether that content is needed. The data has already decided you just need someone to create the page. And more importantly, you need a system that can flag these gaps automatically instead of waiting for a human to read search logs. The intersection of search and AI is particularly powerful. Microsoft Search, integrated with Microsoft Graph, provides a unified search experience across SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, and other services. It supports semantic search, where queries are matched by meaning rather than exact keywords. This means a user searching for "how do I get time off" can find the PTO policy even if the page never uses the word time off. The search engine understands the intent and maps it to the relevant content. This is a critical capability for AI-driven intranets because users don't know your terminology. They know their problem, and the system needs to bridge that gap. But search optimization doesn't happen automatically. It requires structured metadata, clear page titles, and managed properties that tell the search index what each piece of content is about. If your pages have vague titles like policy update or important information, the search engine can't distinguish them from one another. If your metadata is empty or inconsistent, the search engine has no signals to rank results accurately. The best search experience in the world can't compensate for poor content structure. This is why search data and graph data are deeply connected. Search reveals the intent. Graph provides the structure that makes intent discoverable. You need both. Organizations that take search seriously treat search logs as product feedback. They review failed queries weekly. They map common searches to content gaps. They tune result sources and query rules to surface the right content. They use promoted results for high-frequency queries so users find answers immediately. This is not SEO for the public web. It's internal findability engineering, and it's one of the highest leverage activities an intranet team can perform because it directly reduces the time employees spend looking for information. In a large organization, that time savings translates to hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, but you only capture it if you're measuring search behavior. Most organizations aren't. They're tracking page views while ignoring the signal that matters most. Microsoft Search also supports semantic capabilities that most administrators never configure. Query rules allow you to promote specific results for specific terms. Result sources let you scope searches to specific content types or sites. Search verticals create tabs for different content categories. Custom refiners allow users to filter by metadata that actually matters. These features have existed for years, but they're rarely used because search administration is considered a back-end IT task, not a product management task. The result is a default search experience that performs poorly and users who learn to ignore it. When users stop trusting search, they stop using it. And when they stop using it, the search logs stop capturing their intent. The failure becomes self-reinforcing. The only way to break the cycle is to invest in search as a first-class user experience, not as a forgotten infrastructure component. There's another dimension to search that most environments miss. Search doesn't just reveal what users can't find. It reveals how they think about the organization, the vocabulary they use, the problems they face, the connections they expect to exist. If sales reps consistently search for product roadmap, that tells you something about the gap between sales and product teams. If engineers search for customer feedback, that tells you something about information silos. These patterns are strategic intelligence. They show you where the organization is fragmented, where communication is breaking down, and where new content or new connections could create value. A search log is not a technical artifact. It's a window into how work actually happens, and most companies have never looked through it. For an AI-driven intranet, search data becomes training data. The AI learns which queries lead to successful outcomes and which ones lead to frustration. It learns which content answers which intents. It learns the vocabulary of the organization and maps it to the structured language of the content. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where search improves automatically as the AI learns from user behavior. But that loop only works if you're collecting the data. If search logs are ignored, the AI has nothing to learn from, and you're left with a system that has potential but no memory. Most organizations don't even export their search logs. The data exists in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center for a limited retention period, then it ages out. Nobody reviews it, nobody analyzes it, nobody connects it to content planning. This is like running a retail store and never reviewing what customers asked for but couldn't find. The data is there. The insight is free, and it's being thrown away. If you're serious about building an AI-driven intranet, the first technical step is often the simplest. Start collecting and reviewing your search logs weekly. The patterns will surprise you. Microsoft Clarity. Behavior exposes truth, but the most honest signal of all isn't what people type. It's what they do with their mouse. Microsoft Clarity is a free behavioral analytics tool that brings web-level telemetry to SharePoint. Session recordings, heat maps, scroll depth, click maps, rage clicks, dead clicks. It shows you not whether someone visited your page, but whether they struggled with it. And the difference between those two measurements is where the real quality lives. Clarity integrates with SharePoint Online through a SharePoint Framework application customizer. You create a Clarity project, get your project ID, deploy the SPFX solution to your tenant app catalog, and enable it as a tenant-wide extension. Once configured, it runs on every modern SharePoint page without requiring any per-page edits. The script loads client-side, captures behavior, and sends telemetry back to Clarity's cloud service. It's lightweight, it's free, and it takes less than an hour to deploy across an entire tenant. What you get is visibility that SharePoint has never had before. Scroll depth shows you how far down the page users actually read. On many intranet pages, the average scroll depth is under 20%. That means 80% of your carefully crafted content is never seen. Click maps show you where users expect to click. If a static image looks like a button, you'll see click heat maps concentrated on it. That's not user error, that's design failure. The user is telling you with their mouse that they expected something to happen, and when nothing happens, they leave frustrated. Rage clicks are one of the most diagnostic signals Clarity provides. A rage click is when a user clicks the same element multiple times in rapid succession. It means they think something is broken, or they think the page is loading, or they think they're clicking a link that isn't actually a link. Every rage click is a user screaming at your design, and traditional analytics don't capture it. Page views won't show rage. Time on page might increase because the user is clicking repeatedly, making the page look more engaging than it is. Only behavior analytics reveals the frustration. Session recordings take this even further. You can watch anonymized replays of how individual users navigate your pages. Not to spy on employees, but to understand journeys. Where do they start? Where do they hesitate? Where do they backtrack? Where do they give up? A recording of a user trying to complete a task on your intranet is worth more than any focus group, because it's real behavior, not reported behavior. People don't remember their frustrations accurately, but Clarity records every one of them. The combination of Clarity with SharePoint creates a new standard for intranet quality. Not does the page exist, but can users interact with it successfully? Not was the content published, but did anyone read it? Not did the launch go well, but does the page work 6 months later? These are product questions, not project questions, and they require product telemetry to answer. What makes Clarity particularly powerful is that it's free and officially supported. There's no licensing barrier. There's no complex procurement. A SharePoint administrator can deploy it tenant-wide in a single afternoon. The technical barrier is SPFX deployment, which most M365 teams already know how to do. And the data it produces is immediately actionable. You don't need a data scientist to interpret a heat map. You need eyes and a willingness to see that your beautiful page isn't working the way you assumed. There's a common objection to behavioral analytics on intranets: privacy. And it's valid. Recording user behavior inside a corporate environment requires clear policies, appropriate anonymization, and compliance review. But Clarity is designed with privacy controls. You can mask sensitive elements so they're never recorded. You can exclude certain pages or user groups. You can deploy it selectively rather than tenant-wide if your organization requires a more cautious approach. The point isn't to spy on employees, it's to understand whether the digital workplace you've built actually serves them. And that's a legitimate business need that most privacy frameworks accommodate when implemented responsibly. The real question isn't whether you can afford to deploy Clarity, it's whether you can afford not to. Every page on your intranet that users struggle with costs real money in lost productivity, repeated support tickets, and duplicated work. If Clarity helps you fix even 5 high-traffic pages, the time savings across your organization will pay for the deployment 1,000 times over. The tool is free, the data is immediate, the only cost is the courage to look at what it shows you. And for most enterprises, that's the hardest part. There's a specific technical pattern for Clarity deployment that many organizations miss. The Microsoft Learn guidance recommends enabling Clarity as a tenant-wide extension through an SPFX application customizer. This means the tracking code loads on every modern SharePoint page without requiring per-site configuration. You create a Clarity project, capture the project ID, package the SPFX solution, upload it to the tenant app catalog, and enable the tenant-wide extension with the ID as a component property. Once active, the solution captures user interactions asynchronously and sends them to Clarity. It takes about an hour to deploy and covers your entire modern SharePoint footprint immediately. The alternative, deploying site by site through custom actions, creates fragmented coverage and administrative overhead. For most enterprises, tenant-wide is the right pattern unless you have specific privacy requirements that mandate selective deployment. One common deployment mistake is failing to validate that data is actually flowing. GitHub issues show that misconfigured custom actions, incorrect project IDs, or missing app catalog approvals can lead to silent failures. The page loads. The users browse. But nothing reaches Clarity. The fix is simple. After deployment, open a SharePoint page, open browser developer tools, and look for network requests to Clarity's collection endpoints. If you see them, data is flowing. If you don't, your configuration is incomplete. This 5-minute validation step prevents weeks of wondering why the dashboard is empty. The rage click diagnostic. Let me show you what this looks like in practice, and I want you to imagine your own highest traffic page while I walk through this, because the pattern I'm about to describe is probably happening on your site right now. Imagine an HR onboarding site. It's one of the most visited sites in your tenant. 20,000 views per month. The site owner is proud of it. Leadership sees the numbers and considers it a success story. But look closer. Open Microsoft Clarity. Filter to the onboarding homepage. The scroll depth is 18%. That means 82% of your new hires never see the content below the first screen. They arrive, look at what's visible, and decide it's not what they need. In less time than it takes to read a single paragraph, they've already given up on your most important employee experience page. Now look at the click map. The heat map shows dense activity around a section titled New Hire Checklist. It looks like a button. It has an icon. It sits in a highlighted box, but it's not clickable. It's a static image that the designer created to look interactive. 300 new employees clicked it last month. Some clicked it 5 or 6 times in a row. Those are rage clicks. They're not engaging with your content. They're screaming at your design. And your page view report shows 300 engaged users. Switch to the search logs. Query. First day laptop. 340 searches last month. The top result sends users to the IT equipment page, which describes the laptop ordering process for existing employees, not the first day setup for new hires. Query. Benefits enrollment. 210 searches. The top result is a news post from last year's open enrollment period. The actual current benefits page is buried on page 2 of the results because its title is Benefits Update and the search engine can't distinguish it from 50 other pages with update in the title. Now open SharePoint Analytics. The onboarding site is number 3 in tenant-wide traffic. The site owner shows this in every quarterly review. But what the analytics don't show is that most of this traffic is repeat visits, new hires who came back 3 or 4 times because they couldn't find what they needed the first time. The average session duration looks healthy at 2 minutes, but Clarity reveals that those 2 minutes are spent bouncing between 3 pages, backtracking, and eventually leaving without completing a single task. This is what assumptions look like when you finally turn on the lights. This page is a traffic success and a mission failure. By every metric the organization currently tracks, it's a star performer. By every metric that actually matters, it's broken. And it's been broken for 18 months. Nobody knew because nobody was looking at the right signals. The site owner checks views. Leadership sees green. Users suffer in silence because they don't know there's a better version somewhere else. They just know the intranet doesn't work, and they stop trying. Let's go one level deeper. Look at the session recordings. Watch a new hire arrive on the onboarding page. They scroll slightly, pause at the benefits section, then scroll back up. They click the new hire checklist image 3 times. They wait. Nothing happens. They open the site navigation and click a link labeled Forms. That page loads with 14 different PDF links in alphabetical order. None of them mention onboarding. They use the browser's back button. They try the search box inside SharePoint. They type laptop setup. The results show a hardware policy from 2022, a Teams troubleshooting guide, and a page about monitor ergonomics. The actual first day IT guide is not in the results because the page title is Device Provisioning Workflow and the description field is empty. The user gives up. They message their manager in Teams. The manager sends a direct link to a OneDrive folder that contains the actual documents. The new hire bookmarks the OneDrive folder. They never visit the onboarding site again. In your analytics, this session shows as a 2-minute visit with 3 page views. In reality, it was a complete failure of the system you invested months building. Now look at the same journey through the search data lens. 340 people searched for first day laptop last month. 280 of them clicked a result. 190 landed on the wrong page. 40 returned to search within the same session. Only 12 eventually found the correct page. That means 328 people out of 340 did not successfully complete their task using search. Your search success rate is under 4%, but your search analytics dashboard probably shows healthy query volume and doesn't calculate task completion at all. The benefits enrollment story is equally revealing. 210 searches per month. The top result is last year's open enrollment news post because it received many views during that period and search ranking still considers it relevant. The actual current benefits page is ranked low because it was published 18 months ago and hasn't been viewed heavily since launch. Search ranking rewards popularity, not accuracy. So your most important current information sits below outdated content that users click, realize is wrong, and abandon. Each click on the wrong result increases its ranking. The failure reinforces itself. What makes this scenario so common is that each department sees its own numbers in isolation. HR sees 20,000 views and celebrates. It sees their equipment page getting traffic and assumes users are finding what they need. Search administrators see overall query volume and don't know that half the top queries are failing. The experience is fragmented across teams, tools, and reports. Nobody has the complete picture. And without the complete picture, nobody can fix the complete problem. The diagnostic power comes from combining these signals. Clarity shows you where users struggle on the page. Search logs show you what they were trying to find before they arrived. Analytics show you which pages are affected at scale. Graph shows you how the pages connect and whether the structure supports the journey. One signal gives you a symptom. 4 signals give you a diagnosis. And the diagnosis is almost never what the page view report suggests. Consider the new hire checklist, rage clicks. Clarity alone tells you the element is misleading. But search data adds another layer. Many of those rage clicks came from users who searched for onboarding checklist and landed on the homepage because no dedicated checklist page exists. The search failed, so they tried to click what looked like a checklist. The design failure and the content gap are connected. Fixing the button without creating the actual checklist page won't solve the problem. And neither fix would show up in your analytics dashboard as a problem to begin with. Look at the mobile experience too. Clarity shows that 60% of onboarding traffic comes from mobile devices. On mobile, the scroll depth drops to 12%. The navigation menu requires 3 tabs to expand. The PDF forms linked from the page don't render properly on phones. The benefits comparison table that causes rage clicks on desktop is completely unreadable on mobile. So your highest need users, new hires who are setting up their phones and checking benefits while commuting or at home, are getting the worst experience. But your analytics aggregate desktop and mobile together, so the mobile failure is invisible inside the average. The geographic data adds yet another dimension. Clarity shows that users in your Asia-Pacific offices have an average session time of 4 minutes, double the global average. At first, this looks like higher engagement, but the recordings reveal that these users are struggling with English language content and translating pages in their browsers. The longer session is not engagement, it's friction. They need localized content that doesn't exist. Your global analytics show APAC as an engaged region. The behavioral truth is that they're working twice as hard to get half the value. This is why telemetry needs to be comprehensive. Not clarity alone, not search alone, not analytics alone. A nervous system that connects structure, intent, behavior, and outcomes. Without it, you're treating symptoms as successes. You're optimizing for traffic instead of tasks. You're celebrating pages that users tolerate instead of pages that users complete. The onboarding example is not unusual, it's typical. Pick any high-traffic page in your environment and apply the same 4-signal diagnostic. Graph shows you how it's connected. Analytics show you how much traffic it gets. Search shows you what users wanted before they arrived. Clarity shows you what actually happened when they got there. In most environments, the result is uncomfortable, but it's the only way to move from assumptions to evidence. The optimization loop. Now imagine you didn't need to find this manually. Imagine something was watching these patterns for you. That's the shift from analytics to intelligence. Not bigger dashboards, not more reports. A system that reads the signals, finds the correlations, and tells you what's broken before your users complain. This is the optimization loop, and it's built on 4 inputs that most enterprises already have, but almost nobody connects. Graph provides the structural blueprint. It knows what pages exist, how they're connected, what components they contain, and how permissions flow. Analytics provide the popularity layer. They show which pages attract traffic, which are ignored, and where usage trends are shifting. Search provides the intent layer. It reveals what users want, what they can't find, and where the terminology gaps live. Clarity provides the behavioral layer. It exposes the gap between what you built and what users actually experience. When these 4 signals are connected, the system can begin to answer strategic questions. Not simple factual questions, structural questions. Why is this page performing poorly when it receives high traffic? What makes our best performing pages successful? Which web parts correlate with deeper engagement? Which navigation structures reduce search activity instead of increasing it? Which pages generate rage clicks? And what do those pages have in common? These are the questions that transform content management into experience management. The co-pilot becomes something new in this model, not a chatbot that answers questions, not a content assistant that writes faster. A digital UX analyst, a governance advisor, a SharePoint architect, all working simultaneously across every page in your environment. It can identify that your top 20 most visited pages all share a common structural flaw. It can notice that pages with FAQ web parts have 40% lower bounce rates and recommend adding them to similar pages. It can detect that users who arrive via search spend less time on pages with heavy navigation menus and recommend simplifying those menus for search traffic. This moves us beyond manual auditing. Today, if you want to know whether your intranet is working, you hire a consultant. They sample some pages, they run some user interviews, they deliver a report. 6 months later, the report is outdated and the problems have shifted. The optimization loop replaces this with continuous observation. Every click feeds the model. Every search query updates the understanding of intent. Every page edit changes the structural map. The system learns as your environment changes. It doesn't give you a snapshot. It gives you a live diagnosis. The model is simple in concept. Signals feed reasoning. Reasoning produces orchestration. Graph and analytics and search and clarity provide the signals. AI processes the patterns. The output is not a report. It's action. Restructure this page. add this web part, remove this navigation element, create this missing content, update this outdated policy. Each recommendation is grounded in behavioral evidence across thousands of interactions, not in one consultant's opinion or one stakeholder's preference. What makes this loop powerful is the speed of iteration. In a traditional intranet redesign, you might collect user feedback through annual surveys, analyze it over weeks, present findings to a committee, debate priorities for months, and finally implement changes in the next fiscal year. By then, the work patterns have shifted and the recommendations are already outdated. The optimization loop collapses this cycle from years to days. The system detects a pattern on Monday. It generates a recommendation by Tuesday. A human reviews it on Wednesday. The change is live by Thursday. And Clarity starts measuring the impact on Friday. The feedback loop is closed before a traditional project would have completed its kickoff meeting. The loop also scales in ways that human analysis cannot. A UX consultant can review 10 pages in a week. The optimization loop reviews 10,000 pages continuously. It can detect that your top 50 most visited pages all share a common flaw that your bottom 50 pages don't. It can notice that pages created by one business unit have consistently lower engagement than pages created by another and recommend investigating the difference in templates or training. It can identify seasonal patterns that humans would never see because they span across years. Your benefits page gets 3 times the traffic in January. Your expense policy spikes at month end. Your IT support page surges after every Windows update. The loop learns these rhythms and can preemptively recommend content refreshes before the predictable demand arrives. There's also a network effect that emerges once the loop is running. The AI doesn't just learn about individual pages, it learns about your entire digital workplace. It discovers that users who visit the onboarding page are twice as likely to search for benefits information within the same week. So it recommends adding a benefits quick link to the onboarding page. It notices that users who read the remote work policy almost always visit the equipment request page next. So it suggests combining those journeys into a single guided experience. These cross-page insights are invisible when each page is managed in isolation, but they're obvious when an AI can see the entire graph of user journeys at once. Of course, the loop requires integration. The signals must flow into a common analysis layer. Today, this often means exporting Clarity data, search logs, and graph metadata into Azure Synapse or a similar analytics platform. Power BI sits on top, visualizing the patterns. Power Automate triggers actions when thresholds are crossed. A Copilot agent or custom Azure OpenAI model processes the natural language reasoning. This architecture is not trivial to build, but it's not science fiction either. The components exist, the connectors exist. What's missing in most companies is not the technology, it's the will to connect the dots. There's also a maturity progression that most enterprises will follow. Stage 1 is data collection. Deploy Clarity. Export search logs. Audit graph metadata. Stage 2 is visualization. Build dashboards that show the 4 signals side by side for key pages. Stage 3 is alerting. Create automated notifications when a page's scroll depth drops below a threshold or when a search query fails more than 50 times in a week. Stage 4 is automated recommendation. The AI not only detects the pattern, but suggests the fix. Stage 5 is automated optimization. The AI proposes, the human approves, and the system implements. Most enterprises today are at stage 0. They haven't collected the data. Moving to stage 1 is the critical step that unlocks everything else. But can AI actually build the pages or just analyze them? We'll get there. Knowledge Agent, AI as UX analyst. This is where Knowledge Agent enters the picture. And it's probably not what you expect. Knowledge Agent is a Copilot-powered assistant embedded directly in SharePoint. It appears as a floating button across SharePoint experiences. It's context-aware, which means it behaves differently depending on whether you're in a document library, on a page, or in the admin center. And it's not a chatbot. It's not a content assistant that helps you write faster. It's a digital UX analyst and governance advisor that works 24 hours a day. In document libraries, Knowledge Agent examines file content and proposes metadata fields. It generates values. It organizes documents into more meaningful structures. It autofills columns based on what it reads inside the files. This matters because metadata is usually the weakest link in any SharePoint environment. Humans are inconsistent at tagging. Poorly designed metadata schemas make search and filters ineffective. By deriving tags from content, Knowledge Agent creates a richer information architecture without requiring users to become metadata experts. On pages and sites, the agent identifies issues that humans would miss at scale. Outdated content, broken links, content gaps where search queries are failing, pages that receive traffic but haven't been updated in months. It flags these issues and recommends cleanup actions. It can generate FAQ sections from existing documents, turning static pages into dynamic knowledge components. It can propose improvements based on patterns it observes across the environment, not based on a template, based on evidence. What makes this particularly powerful is that Knowledge Agent combines the signals we've been discussing. It doesn't just read the page text, it reads the graph structure. It considers search patterns. It uses the same semantic understanding that powers Copilot across Microsoft 365. So when it recommends a change, it's not applying a generic best practice. It's applying a pattern that it observed working in your specific environment. your users, your content, your navigation patterns. The agent also plays a role in content creation. It can generate FAQ web parts from existing documents. It can draft text for pages or news posts. It can refine content based on prompts or design suggestions. This doesn't mean you publish AI-generated content without review. Accuracy, tone, and compliance still require human oversight. But it means the content creation bottleneck that causes so many pages to go stale can be addressed systematically. Instead of waiting for a site owner to find time to update the page, the agent flags the problem and proposes a draft. The site owner reviews and publishes. The gap between problem and fix collapses from months to hours. For administrators, the content governance agent in the SharePoint Admin Center provides a natural language interface to governance tasks. You can ask about site permissions, lifecycle policies, and storage usage. The agent aggregates data that would otherwise require manual compilation across multiple reports. It identifies sites with no activity for 12 months. It flags permission chains that have become inconsistent. It surfaces storage growth that exceeds normal patterns. This is governance at the speed of conversation, not at the speed of spreadsheet exports. The significance of these agents is not that they replace human judgment, it's that they make human judgment scalable. A single intranet manager cannot review 10,000 pages, but an agent can scan them continuously, prioritize issues by impact, and present the human with a filtered list of the 20 problems that matter most. The human makes the decision, the human approves the change, but the human no longer needs to find the needle in the haystack. The agent brings the needle to them. Knowledge agent also operates differently depending on where you encounter it. In a document library, it behaves like an automated librarian. It examines files, suggests metadata columns based on the content it detects, and generates values to fill those columns. A library full of contracts might get suggested columns for contract type, expiration date, and counterparty. The agent reads the documents, extracts the information, and populates the fields. This is the kind of tedious metadata work that humans are notoriously bad at, and it's exactly the kind of structured data that makes search and Copilot more effective. On a modern SharePoint page, Knowledge Agent behaves like an embedded editor and UX reviewer. It can summarize the page content for quick scanning. It can identify broken links by crawling the URLs embedded in the page. It can detect outdated content by comparing publication dates against organizational freshness policies. And it can suggest improvements based on patterns it observes across higher performing pages in the same site collection. The agent doesn't just tell you what's wrong, it proposes what to do about it. And because it's grounded in graph and search data, its recommendations are specific to your environment, not generic best practices from a blog post. Knowledge Agent also generates FAQ web parts from existing documents, which is a subtle but important shift. Traditionally, FAQs are written by humans who guess what users will ask. The agent reads the actual documents, identifies the questions that the content answers, and formats them as a FAQ section. This means the FAQ is grounded in actual content rather than assumptions. When the underlying document changes, the agent can flag the FAQ for review. This closes another gap in the content lifecycle, where supporting content like FAQs drifts out of sync with the primary documents they reference. It's a small feature with outsized impact on content quality, from analysis to generation. But analysis is only half the story. The real shift happens when AI starts creating. Microsoft has already begun rolling out AI-generated SharePoint pages. The experience starts with a natural language prompt: create an onboarding site for new employees. The system analyzes successful onboarding pages across your environment. It studies usage analytics to see which pages new hires actually use. It examines search behavior to understand what they look for. It reviews engagement patterns to identify which layouts and web parts keep users reading. And it generates a complete proposal. Page structure, navigation, web parts, suggested content, calls to action, search optimization. You don't start from a blank page, you start from a proven experience. The AI doesn't just copy a template, it learns from evidence. If your organization's best performing onboarding pages all start with a quick link section and end with a contact form, the generated page will reflect that pattern. If analytics show that users rarely scroll past the third section, the AI proposes a shorter page with the most critical information at the top. If search logs reveal that new hires consistently look for laptop setup instructions, the AI includes a dedicated section for that topic, even if the human architect didn't think to add it. This is design driven by behavior, not by assumptions. Sections with AI allow you to add entire sections to existing pages from natural language prompts. You describe the goal and the audience. You can ground the section in specific documents for accuracy. The AI generates headings, paragraphs, bulleted lists, tables, and calls to action. You refine via chat. Shorten the introduction. Make the tone more formal. Add a FAQ section. Use a 2-column layout. Each prompt produces one canvas update. You iterate until it matches your needs, then add it to the page. The blank page problem disappears. The starting point is always a structured draft grounded in your organization's actual content. Site creation with AI extends this to the architectural level. You describe the site you want. A project hub for the HR system modernization program, including tasks, documents, and stakeholder updates. The AI proposes a site plan, recommended pages and their names, suggested lists and libraries, navigation elements. You refine the plan via chat, add a risks page, remove the milestones list, rename the stakeholder page to project team. When you're satisfied, you confirm the site name and sensitivity label and the system builds it. What used to require workshops, wireframes, and multiple review cycles now happens in a conversation. This changes the economics of SharePoint development dramatically. A department site that might have taken 6 weeks of meetings, design reviews, and content drafting can now be prototyped in an afternoon. Not finalized, not published without review, but prototyped with structure grounded in evidence. The human team still edits, approves, and polishes. But they no longer start from nothing. They start from a model that has learned what works in their environment. The comparison to templates is important. Templates represent one consultant's best practices at one point in time. An AI model represents the collective behavior of thousands of employees, continuously updated. A template says this is how we think users behave. An AI model says this is how users actually behave. That distinction changes everything. It changes who designs the experience. It changes how quickly the experience can evolve. And it changes what skills the Intranet team needs. Less page building, more evidence review, less template enforcement, more pattern recognition. The generation capabilities also extend to content adaptation. The same page can be rendered differently for different audiences. The executive version leads with key metrics and decision points. The operational version includes step-by-step procedures. The mobile version strips away heavy media and prioritizes quick links. The AI doesn't just generate one page, it generates the right page for the right context. This is personalization at scale, driven by behavioral data rather than by manual audience segmentation. A template can have variations. An AI model can have continuous gradients, adjusting tone, depth, and structure based on what it knows about the user, the device, and the task. There are limits, and it's important to name them. AI-generated pages are not guaranteed to be accurate. They can hallucinate facts. They can misinterpret source documents. They can produce content that sounds authoritative but contains outdated information. This is why human review is not optional. It's mandatory. The AI accelerates the draft. The human validates the truth. The AI proposes the structure. The human confirms it meets compliance requirements. The AI suggests the call to action. The human ensures it aligns with current business priorities. This is a partnership, not a replacement. The speed comes from automation. The quality comes from human judgment. Both are essential. Another important limit is scope. AI generation works best for structured, information-heavy pages where patterns are clear. Onboarding guides, policy summaries, project hubs, FAQ collections. It works less well for highly creative or sensitive communications. A CEO announcement about organizational change requires human tone and judgment that AI cannot replicate. A legal interpretation of a new regulation requires expertise that AI can assist but not replace. The smart approach is to match the tool to the task. Let AI handle the repetitive, pattern-driven content where it excels. Reserve human authors for the communications where voice, nuance, and authority matter most. This division of labor makes both the AI and the humans more effective. Self-optimizing intranets, the feedback loop. And once the page is live, the loop doesn't end. It begins. This is where the concept of a self-optimizing intranet becomes real. Not as a product feature, as an operating model. Publish the page, users interact with it, Clarity captures their behavior, analytics measure engagement, search records their intent, the AI evaluates the outcomes. It proposes improvements. The page evolves continuously, not in annual redesigns, not in quarterly content reviews, in days, sometimes in hours. The intranet becomes a living system, one that learns, one that improves, one that responds to users without requiring a project plan for every change. A page that isn't working gets flagged automatically. The AI suggests a new structure based on patterns from higher performing pages. The site owner reviews and approves. The updated page goes live. Clarity starts measuring the new version immediately. The loop continues. This is the experience platform, not a content management system, not a portal, a system that gets better every day without requiring another 6-month redesign project. The static intranet is replaced by an adaptive experience. The digital workplace becomes a product with a heartbeat, not a building with a completion date. What makes this possible is the integration of the components we've covered. Graph provides the structural awareness, search provides the intent data, analytics provide the usage context, Clarity provides the behavioral truth, knowledge agent provides the analysis and generation, and the human team provides the judgment, the governance, and the approval. The AI doesn't replace the intranet team. It makes them effective at a scale that was previously impossible. Consider what this means for governance. Today, governance is largely reactive. A user complains that a page is outdated. A search administrator notices that queries are failing. A content owner remembers to review their pages once a year, if they remember at all. In a self-optimizing model, governance becomes proactive. The agent flags outdated content before users encounter it. It identifies broken links before they accumulate. It detects content gaps from search failures and proposes new pages. The governance team shifts from firefighters to architects. They set the rules. The agents enforce them at scale. The shift also changes how organizations should think about investment. Today, most SharePoint budgets go to builds and migrations. Design projects, template rollouts, platform upgrades. In a self-optimizing model, the budget shifts to telemetry, integration, and governance automation. Clarity deployment, graph data quality, search schema tuning, agent configuration. These are not flashy investments. They don't produce demos that impress leadership, but they produce the infrastructure that makes every AI feature actually work. There's also a cultural shift that comes with self-optimization. Today, many intranet teams are defensive. They protect their designs. They resist changes that weren't in the original plan. They measure success by adherence to standards rather than by user outcomes. A self-optimizing model requires the opposite mindset. It requires a willingness to let evidence override opinion, to let user behavior challenge established design patterns, to let AI recommendations test assumptions that have gone unquestioned for years. This is harder than any technical implementation. It requires organizational humility, the willingness to admit that the current design might be wrong and the data might know better. The feedback loop also creates compounding returns. The first month of telemetry reveals obvious problems. The rage clicks, the failed searches, the broken links. These are quick wins. But as the loop continues, it starts to reveal deeper patterns. It notices that users who complete the expense form in under 3 minutes almost always started from search, while users who take longer started from navigation. It discovers that pages updated within the last 30 days have 40% higher task completion than older pages. It identifies that the terminology in your engineering site doesn't match the terminology in your sales site, causing search failures at the boundary between them. These are not obvious problems. They're subtle patterns that only emerge from continuous observation at scale. This is why the organizations that get ahead will not be the ones with the biggest AI budgets. They'll be the ones with the cleanest graph data, the most complete search logs, the most comprehensive clarity coverage, the most consistent metadata. Because AI is not magic, it's pattern recognition. And pattern recognition only works when the patterns are visible. The companies that invested in information architecture, metadata discipline, and telemetry before AI arrived are the ones whose AI experiences will actually function. Everyone else will be trying to build a smart system on top of a messy foundation. And that doesn't work. The foundation matters more than the features. A mediocre AI on a clean foundation will outperform a state-of-the-art AI on a messy foundation every time. The algorithm can only see what the data reveals. If the data is incomplete, inconsistent, or inaccurate, the recommendations will be too. This is the hardest lesson for organizations rushing to adopt AI. They want the outcomes without the preparation. They want the intelligence without the infrastructure. But AI is not a substitute for good architecture. It is an amplifier of it. Good architecture becomes great. Bad architecture becomes visible. And there's no hiding from visibility once the lights are on. Why templates are not enough. But before you get excited, there's a hard truth about templates and standardization. Organizations have relied on templates for years. Templates provide consistency. They enforce branding, they reduce design decisions, and for a static intranet, they're a reasonable approach. But templates do not learn. A template represents one consultant's best practices at one point in time. It encodes assumptions about what users need, how they navigate, and what information belongs together. Those assumptions might have been accurate when the template was created. They become less accurate every month that users interact with the site in ways the template never anticipated. An AI model represents the collective behavior of thousands of employees, continuously updated. It observes which pages succeed and which fail. It notices that users consistently ignore the welcome banner that every template includes. It detects that the 3-column layout performs worse than the 2-column layout for mobile users. It identifies that pages with video introductions have lower scroll depth than pages with text summaries. A template cannot make these adjustments. An AI model can. And that difference changes the economics of intranet management. The distinction is fundamental. A template says this is how we think users behave. An AI model says this is how users actually behave. One is based on opinion, the other is based on evidence. One is frozen at creation, the other evolves with every interaction. And in a world where work patterns change faster than project timelines, only the evolving model can keep up. A template that was perfect for hybrid work in 2023 might be completely misaligned with how teams collaborate in 2026. An AI model would detect that shift in months. A template would detect it never. This changes the role of the intranet team. Today, many intranet teams spend most of their time building pages, enforcing templates, and policing brand compliance. In an AI-driven environment, that work is automated. The team becomes experience curators, not page builders. They set the goals, they define the guardrails, they review AI-generated recommendations and decide which to implement. They focus on strategy, user research, and governance instead of production work. This is a better use of skilled people. But it requires a different skill set. Less SharePoint designer, more data literacy, less template management, more pattern interpretation. The template mindset also creates a false sense of security. Leadership sees consistent branding across every site and assumes the intranet is well managed. But consistency is not quality. A consistently broken experience is still broken. A consistently confusing navigation structure is still confusing. Templates make bad design scale efficiently. They ensure that every department gets the same flawed assumptions instead of allowing each department to develop its own. The result is a uniform failure mode instead of a distributed one. And uniform failures are harder to detect because there's no variation to compare against. What organizations need is not more templates, it's more telemetry, not more standardization, more evidence. The goal should not be to make every page look the same. The goal should be to make every page work. And working means different things for different audiences, different tasks, and different contexts. An AI system can learn these variations and adapt. A template can only enforce averages. An average design produces average outcomes. In a competitive environment for employee attention and productivity, average is not enough. The template mindset also produces a false efficiency. Leadership loves templates because they reduce design decisions. They speed up page creation. They ensure consistency. But they speed up the creation of bad pages just as efficiently as good ones. A template for a project site might include a risk register, a milestones list, and a stakeholder directory. But if your users never click the risk register, the template is producing waste at scale. An AI model would notice that the risk register has near zero engagement across 90% of project sites and recommend removing it from the default template. A template committee would debate whether risk management is important and decide to keep it because it should be used. The AI follows the evidence, the committee follows the assumption, and assumptions are what got us into this problem in the first place. Governance in the age of AI design, which brings us to the part nobody wants to talk about, governance. The vision of AI-generated self-optimizing intranets raises hard questions. Should AI optimize purely for engagement? Will every page eventually look the same as the AI converges on what works? Who approves AI-generated content? How do you maintain compliance when pages are changing automatically? How do you prevent incorrect recommendations from propagating across your environment? These questions are not objections to the vision. They are prerequisites for implementing it responsibly. The goal is not to replace human expertise. The goal is to augment it. AI becomes a partner, not a replacement. And like any partnership, it requires clear boundaries. Approval workflows for AI-generated pages are essential. The AI can propose. The human must approve. Sensitivity labels must be applied before publication, not after. Microsoft Purview integration ensures that AI-generated content inherits the same compliance rules as human-created content. Retention policies must govern AI outputs just as they govern human outputs. And Copilot audit logging must be enabled to trace every AI recommendation back to its source data and reasoning. Microsoft's content governance agent in the SharePoint Admin Center is a step in this direction. It allows administrators to ask natural language questions about site permissions, lifecycle policies, and storage usage. The agent aggregates data from across the tenant and presents insights that would otherwise require manual report compilation. It identifies inactive sites, inconsistent permissions, and policy violations. This is governance at scale, not by replacing the governance team, but by giving them tools that match the scale of the environment they're responsible for. The governance model must evolve from control to orchestration. In a static intranet, governance means enforcing rules. Every site must use the approved template. Every page must have the standard footer. Every image must comply with brand guidelines. In an AI-driven intranet, governance means setting parameters and monitoring outcomes. The AI can experiment within boundaries. It can test different layouts on low-risk pages. It can measure which variations perform better and recommend broader rollout. The governance team becomes a laboratory manager, not a traffic cop. They design the experiments, they review the results, they decide which patterns become standards and which remain exceptions. There's also a practical consideration around licensing and cost. Knowledge Agent requires Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses. AI-generated pages and sections require Copilot. Content Governance Agent requires SharePoint Advanced Management. These are not free capabilities. Organizations need to budget for them, but the cost of licensing should be compared against the cost of not having them. A single content author spending 40 hours per month on manual page updates costs more than their Copilot license. A governance failure that exposes sensitive data costs infinitely more than Purview integration. The investment in AI features is small compared to the cost of manual work, content drift, and compliance risk that these features eliminate. The licensing model also rewards scale. A Copilot license is a per-user cost, but the benefits are organization-wide. When one user generates a page with AI, that page serves thousands of future visitors. When one administrator uses Content Governance Agent, the policies they enforce protect the entire tenant. The return on investment is not linear. It's multiplied across every employee who interacts with the improved content. This is why early adopters often see the fastest payback. The first AI-generated page saves one author a few hours, but the 1,000th page saves the organization months of cumulative user time. The economics improve as the system grows. There's also a risk of over-optimization. If the AI optimizes purely for engagement metrics, it might produce clickbait-style intranet content, flashy headlines, shallow summaries, interactive elements that increase time on page without increasing comprehension. This is why the governance framework must include outcome metrics, not just behavioral metrics. Did the user complete their task? Did they find the right policy? Did they submit the correct form? These are harder to measure than scroll depth or click rate, but they're the only metrics that matter, and they require the governance team to define what success looks like for each page type, then feed those definitions back into the AI's optimization criteria. Privacy and compliance also need attention. Behavioral analytics like clarity capture detailed user interactions. Search logs contain sensitive queries. Graph data reveals organizational relationships. All of this is valuable for optimization, but it must be handled according to your organization's privacy framework, regulatory requirements, and employee consent policies. Mask sensitive elements in clarity recordings. Anonymize search logs before using them for AI training. Restrict graph data, connect exports to approved analytics environments. The telemetry that powers the self-optimizing intranet must be collected responsibly. Otherwise, the optimization becomes surveillance. And that breaks trust faster than any broken page ever could. The organizations that succeed will be the ones that treat governance as an enabler, not a blocker. They'll invest in automated policy enforcement through Power Automate, sensitivity labels, and retention policies. They'll establish clear ownership for AI-generated content. They'll create review cycles for agent recommendations. And they'll build feedback loops so users can report when AI-generated pages are inaccurate, misleading, or off-brand. Governance in an AI era is not about saying no. It's about saying yes within boundaries that protect the organization and its employees. The 4 phases ahead. So what does the timeline actually look like? Over the next 3 to 5 years, I believe most companies will move through 4 distinct phases. Phase 1 is happening now. AI analyzes your SharePoint environment. Knowledge agent scans your content. Clarity captures your user behavior. Graph exposes your structural patterns. The analysis is continuous, automated, and comprehensive in a way that manual audits never could be. This phase is about visibility. Most enterprises have never had it. Once they do, everything else becomes possible. Phase 2 follows naturally. AI recommends improvements continuously. Not in annual reports, not in quarterly reviews, in real time. The agent flags outdated content the day it passes your freshness threshold. It detects broken links before users complain. It identifies content gaps from failed search queries and proposes new pages. It recommends layout changes based on clarity heat maps. The intranet team shifts from finding problems to reviewing solutions. The cycle time collapses from months to days, and the quality of the environment improves continuously instead of episodically. Phase 3 is where the real transformation happens. AI generates pages and site structures from evidence, not from templates, not from consultant opinions, from the accumulated behavioral data of your own employees. Onboarding sites that reflect what new hires actually search for. Project hubs that include the web parts your most successful projects use. Policy pages structured around the questions your users actually ask. Each generated page is grounded in the patterns of what already works in your environment. And each one is reviewed by a human before publication. The generation is automated, the judgment is human. Phase 4 is the destination. AI continuously optimizes experiences based on live user behavior. The page is never finished, it is always adapting. The layout shifts based on device and context. The content reorders based on what similar users found helpful. The navigation simplifies based on search patterns. The intranet becomes an intelligent experience platform, not a content management system, not a portal, a platform that learns from every click, every search, and every interaction, and gets better without requiring another redesign project. At that point, we may stop talking about intranets altogether. The word carries too much baggage, too many associations with static pages, departmental silos, and abandoned projects. Instead, we'll talk about intelligent experience platforms, systems that understand context, systems that adapt to users, systems that improve themselves. The technology has been moving in this direction for years. The phase model simply describes how organizations will catch up to what's already possible. The timeline varies by organization. Companies that already have clean information architecture, consistent metadata, and deployed telemetry might move through all 4 phases in 18 months. Companies that are still managing SharePoint, like a file share, might take 3 years just to complete phase 1. The gap between leaders and laggards will widen quickly, because the organizations with good data will see compounding returns from AI, while the organizations with messy data will see compounding frustration. The AI doesn't care about your intentions, it cares about your inputs. Clean data produces clean recommendations. Messy data produces messy recommendations. There is no AI shortcut around information architecture. The phase model also helps with internal communication. When leadership asks for an AI roadmap, you can show them exactly where you are and what comes next. Phase 1 requires telemetry deployment and data cleanup. Phase 2 requires integration and dashboard development. Phase 3 requires co-pilot licensing and pilot projects. Phase 4 requires governance automation and continuous deployment pipelines. Each phase has specific deliverables, specific costs, and specific prerequisites. This transforms the conversation from vague AI aspiration into a concrete program with measurable milestones. Leadership understands programs. They fund programs. They don't fund vague aspirations. For most companies, the realistic starting point is phase 1 with a limited scope. Pick one high-value site, onboarding, HR policies, IT support, deploy clarity, export search logs for that area, Audit the graph metadata, build a simple dashboard that shows the 4 signals side by side. Run it for 90 days. The patterns you discover will justify expanding to the next site. And the next, small scope, fast learning, incremental expansion. This is how you build an AI-driven intranet without betting the farm on a transformation project that takes 2 years to show results. The real question. But here's the question that actually matters. It's not whether AI can build SharePoint pages. It can. The demos exist, the products are shipping, the capabilities improve every quarter. The question is deeper. If an AI system learns from millions of user interactions and consistently produces better outcomes than manual design, why would you keep designing those experiences by hand? If the algorithm understands your users better than your committee does, why does the committee still decide? This is uncomfortable. It challenges professional identity. It challenges the value of design expertise. It challenges the entire project-based model that has governed SharePoint work for 2 decades. But the challenge is not theoretical, it's empirical. The organizations that deploy telemetry, connect their signal sources, and let AI learn from evidence will produce better intranet experiences than the organizations that don't. Not because the AI is smarter than the humans, because the AI has better data. It sees patterns that no human can see across 10,000 pages. It tests variations that no human has time to test. It learns continuously while humans learn episodically. The professionals who thrive in this transition will not be the ones who resist it. They'll be the ones who lean into it. They'll learn to read telemetry the way they once learned to read wireframes. They'll interpret AI recommendations the way they once interpreted user interviews. They'll set governance guardrails instead of enforcing design standards. Their value won't decrease, it will shift. From building pages to orchestrating systems, from enforcing templates to interpreting evidence, from managing launches to optimizing outcomes. This transition also creates new career paths. The telemetry architect who designs the signal collection and integration pipeline. The AI curator who reviews agent recommendations and decides which to implement. The experienced data analyst who translates behavioral patterns into design decisions. These roles don't exist in most enterprises today. But they will, and the people who develop these skills now will be the ones who define the field in 5 years. Just as the first SharePoint architects defined a career path in the 2010s, the first experienced platform architects will define the next generation of digital workplace roles. The future of SharePoint isn't more governance meetings about page layouts. It's not another round of template standardization. It's not a bigger training program for content authors. It's a system that replaces assumptions with evidence. A system that treats the intranet as a product to be continuously improved, not a project to be completed and abandoned. And it may arrive sooner than you think. If this changed how you think about SharePoint, follow me, Mirko Peters, on LinkedIn. I post regularly about Microsoft 365 architecture, AI strategy, and the future of the digital workplace. And if you want more of this, leave a review. It helps more people find the podcast. Share this with your team, especially if you're dealing with static intranet problems right now. The organizations that understand this shift early will have a significant advantage. The ones that wait will be optimizing a dead model. Subscribe to the M365 FM podcast. Next episode, we'll look at how to build your first telemetry pipeline for SharePoint, step by step. What to instrument first, what to ignore, and how to turn behavioral data into actual design decisions. We'll walk through clarity deployment, search log export, and graph data connection in practical terms you can use immediately. You won't want to miss it. If you're already thinking about which page to diagnose first, you're on the right track. Start small. Start now. The data is already there. You just need to look at it. And once you do, you'll never see SharePoint the same way again.